back to another Street Pilots video. And this is one of the most common questions that I do get, is people wanting to buy a motorcycle and they don't know what to look for when they're buying a used bike. So today I have a bike that is not mine. It is a new bike. However, I'm going to give you the tips and tricks that I know of what I look for when I'm buying a new bike. So the first thing that I always do, and it's actually done before I even come to take a look at the bike, is that I will ask the seller to keep the bike cold. And the reason I ask for this is because there's a lot of noises that happen when the bike warms up. And while it's warming up, you will be able to hear any bad ticks, clicks, clunks, bangs, whatever that may be hidden when the bike is warm. So I always ask for the bike to be kept cold before I get there to take a look at it. So that is going to be my first point. Keep the bike cold. Number two, when you get to the location where the bike is at, another rider, it happens. So, I'll keep that in. Number two, so when I get to the bike, and now I'm going to do a full visual inspection. I'm going to look through it and see if there's anything completely obvious with this bike that may be at fault. Like, hey, has this bike been dropped that is not listed in the ad? So as I'm walking around, I can see that there's a couple of scratches on this bike. One down here, one down here, one over here. That's very noticeable, but sometimes they may be hidden. And now, this is a good point for you to talk to the seller and be like, hey, was this bike dropped? Perhaps they're going to admit to it, perhaps not, but it is something to take into consideration when looking at the motorcycle. Is there any damage? Also, feel free to play around, touch things, and see how they look, because I have come up to a bike before where I turned the throttle and the throttle was stuck in the on position. That throttle was never cleaned and the bike was from like 1992, but still make sure that everything feels right. Next, again, before the bike is started, what I'm going to do is that I would straighten out the bike and I would want to see what the oil level is at. And this is also a good indication to me of whether the seller is actually taking care of their motorcycle. Because a motorcycle with very low oil, maybe the seller doesn't not know about maintenance, or maybe they don't care. So it's another good indication of how this bike was upkept. So let's stand up the bike and let's check oil level, oil condition, and as well as we can also take a quick look at the other fluids such as your brake fluid and your coolant. So here we are at the bike and we're about to check oil. So how you check oil on a motorcycle is that you actually have to have the motorcycle level to see where the oil level is at. On some motorcycles, you're going to have a sight glass. On other ones, you're going to have a dipstick. Over here in a 2024 R1, we're going to have a sight glass, and I'm going to have my lovely assistant over here help me stand up the bike straight so that I can talk to you guys while I check the oil. A little more. Okay, perfect. So you try getting it as level as possible. And then unfortunately, on this bike, it is not as noticeable, especially to the side of the camera, but there's a little sight glass in behind this fairing, and then I can see that he is right at about center of what the spec should be. So with that, we know that he maintains his oil. I also know that he did his oil change yesterday. However, one thing to always do is to see the consistency of the oil. Put her back down. Now that I have indicated that the oil level is good, I want to see what the oil quality is like. So the reason I check this is, I want to see, is it clean? Does it smell bad? Is there metal shavings in it? So I'm going to dip my finger in, I'm going to pull some oil out, and I'm just going to see how does it look. So in this case, it's super clear, smells fresh, does not smell burnt. A good indication for smelling the oil, and this will not apply to two-stroke motorcycles. However, older four-stroke motorcycles that have a carburetor and a petcock, I have seen guys that do not shut off their petcock when long-term storing or when you find a barn find, and their fuel has finally went all the way down their engine, past the seals, past everything, and now you got an oil fuel mixture inside of your crankcase. So we want to avoid that, and a good indication is your oil smells like gasoline. So now we know that the oil is good, we know that the oil level is good. Let's look at the other fluids. Quick indication that the brake reservoir at the front has a good level, and also the fluid does not look brown. Now, in addition, we're going to do the same thing for the rear reservoir. Again, take a look at it, make sure it is at an appropriate level. If you have a leak in your brake system, outside of having spongy brakes, a good indication is that your fluid level is low. In addition, if your brake fluid is becoming a very dark brown, it tells me that you haven't changed it in a while or ever. And just like any other oil mixture, it degrades over time, so I do recommend checking it. However, if the level is good and the color is a little bit dirtier, it is not the end of the world. Next, again, going back to a physical check. I'm already down low, so this is a good time to check the tires. Now, with tires, I love the term tire kicking, but we're not actually going to kick tires. We are going to look at a couple things. So, manufacturers for tires do not recommend any tires after 6 years. And the reason they do that is because they cannot confirm that the rubber compounds will be good after 6 years. I have seen tires that are good after 10 years. So it does not necessarily mean that a 6-year tire is going to be bad, but it is on you to check. So what am I looking at with a tire? The camera will come closer and I will kind of educate you guys on what to look for in a tire. Looking at a tire, I'm going to do the same thing that I'm doing on the rear. I'm going to do the same thing on the front. So you can always look at your inflation, and as long as the tires are not really deflated, I would roll the tire, rolling the motorcycle, and look at flat spots, basically indicating that this bike has sat without moving in a long time. It may have a flat spot. If the tire overall looks pretty good, what I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at its quality. On the sidewalls, I don't want to see any cracking. A cracking indicates that the tire is aging and the rubber compound is starting to harden, and therefore it's splitting. Next, I'm going to look at the tire, and if you don't have a depth gauge with you, there is a penny trick. However, inside of your tires, you do have wear bars, same as on your cars, and 2/32 is the bare minimum for your safe tire depth, and that is the absolute minimum before you have to change a tire. However, what you can do is you can look is if your main tire compound is meeting your tire depth little indicators that are your wear bars inside of your tires, and we'll zoom in and show you those. So as long as you're above that, your tire may still be good. And now this is the big one. Every tire, whether it's car, whether it's motorcycle, will have a DOT number. The DOT number is Department of Transportation, and beside it, you're going to see 4 numbers. Those 4 numbers indicate, the first 2 indicate the week, and the last 2 the year that this tire was manufactured. So this tire right here that we're looking at is 3923. So this tire was done towards the second half of 2023. Now we're in August of 2024, so to me, this tire is already 1 year old. It is in good shape, it is still roadworthy. However, even when you're buying new tires, a lot of people have tires on their shelves that have never been installed, but when you look at their number, they might be from 2019 or 2018, indicating that this tire is already approaching its 5 to 6 year mark. Yes, it may be good, but you can also get a discount based on the fact that the tire is getting close or over its 6 year mark. So looking at this tire, we're looking at it and it all looks good, and we're going to look at the same on the front. So remember, cracking, any deformities or flat spots, DOT numbers, and your tread depth is the things you're looking for in a tire. Next, so we're still have not turned on the bike, and there's certain things that you can verify with the bike running. However, some things, if you have a partner in crime, they may be able to aid you with. So one thing for me is if the bike starts without any issues, it is a good indication that the battery is healthy. However, you never know, stator, rectifier, if everything's still outputting right. So if you understand how to use a multimeter and you could bring one out to test your battery and your overall charging system, always a good suggestion. However, if you are just here without tools, the bike starts and the bike runs, that is a good indication of everything coming on. Another thing that I like to do is that with the bike being cold, I am going to start the bike and I'm going to let it idle. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to let it warm up and get up to temperature. When your bike gets up to temperature, things you're going to be able to check is, hey, is my thermostat opening because are my fans kicking on? Is my bike starting to overheat? Any lights coming on for overheating because your coolant is not circulating properly? And in addition, basically you're monitoring for clicks and ticks. However, another thing you can do is when you ride it, you can check a lot of your steering and suspension system. But in my case, because I have my buddy over here, you can do a two-person way of a quick check of how to check your wheel bearings. So with the help of Mista Buns, we are going to show you how to quickly check your bearings. So we're going to check wheel bearings over here. So how to check your bearings is the best way is if you can get your bike up on stands and then you do a wiggle of your wheel to see if you feel any clicking or any free play in the bearings that should not be there. However, we do not have stands with us in the middle of nowhere. So what you can do is you can ask your friend to help you with the following. So come over here, friend. What your friend is going to do, and you want to ensure that they're strong enough to do so, is that they're going to safely and securely pivot the bike on its kickstand until the wheel is off the ground. So I will let you do. With the rear wheel off the ground and he can't hold it for too long, a quick check. I do not feel any play. We check the rear and the rear is fine. And now we can do the same thing on the front. See if we can get it up off the ground. There we go, a little more. Perfect. With the front steering axle, if you go side to side, there may be a chance that you're actually feeling the steering versus feeling the actual bearing. So with the front, I do prefer going just up and down than the sides. So to me, that is a quick indication that the bearings on this vehicle are good. Next, again, I still have not started the bike. Toss your leg over it. And again, this is a good field test of jouncing it around and seeing if any of your shocks make noises. So, don't want to scratch your bike with my keys. We want to shake it back. And now we're going to shake the front. No squeaks, no noise. However, after jouncing it, because maybe the seller has cleaned it up, what I want to do is I want to look at the shocks, the rear and the front forks, and feel them with my hands to see if I can find any wet spots. Basically, if there's fluid coming out, that means dirt and dust can get in and you're going to wear your springs on the inside. So here is a good indication that you have a problem and your seals are failing and it's time to do a fork change. Again, we cannot tell the consistency of the fluid, but because this is a 2024 motorcycle with low kilometers, I have a good guess that the fluids here are going to be good. Now, and this one may be completely lame to some of you guys, but next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the key onto just ignition on, and I'm going to do a function test of your simple road safe functions. So we're going to check blinker left. Good, good. We're going to check blinker right. Good. And good. We're going to check high beams, which in this case they turn on when the bike is on. We're going to check your horn, which is good. And then on This does not apply to every single motorcycle, but a lot of them will have hazards, which I can see work here and working on the mirrors. Now for the next one, again, best to have a buddy. I'm going to again toss a leg over the motorcycle, and I'm going to check if my brake lights are coming on for my front brakes and for my rear brakes. Just come on in, and I will just let you tell me if they're good. So, ready?
Yep.
Front brake?
Yep.
And then we're going to do rear brake.
Yep.
Good. At this point, the only other thing I want to check while I'm on this side of the motorcycle, and we'll bring the camera around, is the chain. Do a quick visual of the chain. In addition, you can always roll the bike to see how the chain rotates, but you want to check that it's not rusty and none of the links visibly look damaged, stretched, or maybe they're so dirty and rusty that they're kinked and stuck. So visual inspection of the chain looks fine, and I'm going to do just a quick check. Recommend wearing gloves for this, or maybe you can use your foot, but just a little bit of a chain tension. Reason being is that you don't want it too tight and you don't want it too loose. Even if you don't know the spec, you want to make sure that it just does not feel sloppy. Last thing that I keep saying, it's the last thing, but as it comes to me, because usually I do car inspections because my main job is a vehicle technician for the Canadian Armed Forces. I don't really do a lot of motorcycles, so with a smaller object, I do forget my points. However, while you're down low, you can visually inspect your rotors, front and rear, for any warpage. So a quick pass of your finger, again, you don't want to get a lot of oil and grime onto your rotor, but a good indication of whether it has a lot of grooving and a lot of destruction to the rotor is a good indication. And then you can visually inspect, stick your head in there and inspect your pads. And your bare minimum pad wear that is permissible for road safety is 2 millimeters. So 2 millimeters is quite tiny, so you want to look at your rotors and pads. And when you're looking at your pads, it's not only just 2 millimeters, you also want to make sure that if you have a single rotor, is that your pads are equal wear on both sides, and if you have dual rotors, that your pads from the left side rotor to the right side rotor are also equal between the two of them. And you want to look at the top and bottom, because sometimes your pads may wear on an angle, and that indicates that either A, your slider pins may be seized or dirty or stuck, or maybe either your caliper is seizing and dragging your brakes, which will be a good indication for your pads not being worn evenly amongst the two pads per side or from one side to the other. Now that I've checked the pads visually, I want to do a little quick check before I check them while riding, because again, this is a new bike and I do not know the status of it. So a big good thing for me personally to check is that I want to press the brake on the front and try to move the bike and make sure that the brake is holding me. And then the same thing is I want to press the brake on the rear independently and see if I can move the brake, if I can overcome the brake. Because brake that doesn't work right now is definitely not going to work when you're under power, and that's going to be one of the worst things is if you purchase a motorcycle, you start riding and you lose your brakes. Again, spongy brakes, any liquid seeping from your brakes indicates that liquid is getting out of your system. And when liquid gets out, air gets in. And you cannot compress a liquid, but you can compress air. And if you can compress air, you're going to have a delay in your brakes because you're going to have to compress all that air before you touch the fluid, and then therefore you're not going to have braking. So again, quick check of your brakes before you turn on the bike. Now, it's that time. We're going to start up the bike and we're going to listen. So, forewarning, this bike has a super loud aftermarket exhaust, and that's again why I check so much stuff when I don't turn it on, and I also ask for the bike being cold, is because it's going to emphasize certain noises, but also a loud exhaust can hide a lot of bad noises, especially if the engine is warmed up. So, let's start the bike. bike longer. I would wait for the fan to kick on. I would make sure that it's getting up to temperature. In this case, we're getting late in the evening and I don't want to piss off all the neighbors around here, and the bike sounds good. In a lot of cases, as soon as you turn it on and it cranks, it is going to sound like crap if there's problems. But again, I always recommend running it up to temperature. In addition, I also did forget one point. If your buddy holds up the bike up, instead of just checking the bearings, on the front, you can also wiggle your two forks and you can see if you have any upper tree, lower tree bearing play and any fork play in anything by just having the wheel off the ground and trying to wiggle the two forks amongst themselves. However, you can also confirm all of that with going for a test ride. So the next thing is, after your bike has been warmed up and you've checked everything over, take it for a spin. It does not need to be a long spin, but I would try out every single gear. Make sure that it gets 1 through 6. Make sure you're not getting any false neutrals. Make sure that your bike doesn't get stuck in revving. Make sure your bike doesn't stall when your clutch is depressed. And in addition, another good way to see if your tree clamps are good is by riding in a straight line at a moderate safe speed and taking both of your hands off the handlebars, but be ready to grab them if anything is wrong, because it's a good indication if your handlebars start jiggling and walking on a smooth, flat surface, that will tell you that there's something wrong, looseness or jamming in your steering column due to some kind of wear. So because this is not my bike, what I'm going to get you guys to see is that we're going to toss on a GoPro onto a helmet, and Mista Buns is going to take his bike out. He's going to cycle some gears. He's going to talk through and see how everything is shifting. And in addition, he's going to take his hands off the handlebars while being safe and see if there's any play in his handlebars going left to right. That's next.
Front brake, rear brake, she rides straight.
So with the road test done, you're basically all good to go. Now, my personal tips is be honest with the seller. Don't try to hide things. A lot of times when I get called out as a mechanic to go look at stuff, I take a look and I just honestly tell everybody about it because I do not want to be involved in the financial transaction. I just want to be honest about the status of the bike to the best of my knowledge. Perhaps I must have missed something. Perhaps I didn't. So if you feel free to comment below and tell me if there's anything I have forgotten. When the bike comes back from the road test, another good thing, for instance, to check is, hey, does the bike shut off? Does the bike turn back on? Because maybe there's a problem with your switch. There still may be things you miss, but this should cover overall a good representation of how the bike is handling and what kind of state it's in. Lastly, and this one is kind of a tip that I got when I did my riding course. And this one is not actually to do with anything with the bike. There's a huge buyer and seller community there for gear. And always buy gear, dress for the slide and not the ride. However, that being said, do not buy used helmets. And the reason they told me this on my riding course is that your helmet is made for one impact. What does that mean? If you are carrying your helmet and you drop it down the stairs, and it got scratched all over, is the helmet still bad? No, because the helmet just got dropped and it got bumped around on the surface. However, the styrofoam and all the padding inside, if you fall down the stairs with your head inside of the helmet and then you crushed one of the styrofoam paddings or anything, that area is no longer safe for absorbing an impact. And you don't know if the previous person may have fallen with their head inside of the helmet. So my suggestion to you is don't buy a used helmet. Everything else, your boots, your gloves, your pants, your jacket, your full suit, go for it. So if you guys like this kind of content, please subscribe. It does really help us grow and bring more informative content to you guys. And like I said before, if I have missed something or you have another suggestion or recommendation, comment below. Thank you and ride safe.